you are not allowed to make eye contact with anyone, but especially not another trafficker. So people who don't make eye contact, yes, they could very well be on the spectrum. So not everyone who doesn't make eye contact is being trafficked. I want to say that very clearly. However, somebody that used to make eye contact, that used to be able to look you in the eye and talk to you, when they can't do that anymore, there's a change in behavior. That can be a very big warning sign. But if I'm going for a job interview and I can't look you in the eye, that's going to be a barrier to an employment. That's going to be a barrier to leaving.
Hello and welcome to The Movement, a podcast to resource, empower and develop leaders in the fight against human trafficking. Today we have a very special guest, Carrie Harney.
Good job.
See, I didn't say any other name for your last name.
You did great. I'm sure you say all of your guests are very special guests.
I do actually.
Yes.
They are very special.
But we're all special.
Exactly. Some people cotton on to that and some people are like, well, I don't know if I'm that special, but you know.
We're all special in our own way.
We're all special in our own way.
That's right.
So, Carrie.
Yes, sir.
Where are you from?
I'm from the Houston area.
Oh, that was like shocker. That wasn't shocking
I
at
almost
all.
didn't want to say the name of where I'm from.
Houston. Oh.
I'm from Pasadena, so that's where I grew up.
There's another name for that, but I'm not. Not on this podcast.
No. So that's where I'm from. Is I grew up in the Pasadena area.
Wow.
And then in my adult life, I've lived a lot of different places, and we ended up settling back down. Now I live north of Houston.
Right. So we'll call it Houston-ish.
Houston-ish.
I
like it.
Yeah, it's always been around here because of the weather.
Oh, I love the weather so much.
It's the best.
When I lived in Washington State, I missed this weather.
I bet you're like all this cold and trees and mountains. And rubbish.
I know. Just all the green. What was happening? I could breathe there.
Oh,
I don't even know.
Breathing. Yes. It's the worst. So you grew up here.
I grew up here.
What do you do now? What's your job?
The title that we use is peer support specialist. I'm also a support group liaison with an anti-trafficking organization known as Hands of Justice. We're based out of like the Conroe area, but we serve people all over the United States, and we're even open internationally if people wanted to attend support groups internationally with the time changes and everything. We're available to anyone that we have. Most of our support groups are English speaking, but we do have a Spanish speaking support group.
Cool.
That we've just started. So
French, German, you're not doing
nothing yet.
Okay.
We just need people
Portuguese.
to come our way. Then we'd be willing to partner with people, and we're open to any other languages. Currently, we're restricted to English and Spanish because that's what
you got.
That's what we've got.
All right, cool. So being involved in anti-trafficking, fighting trafficking, most people don't choose that path. How did you get there?
I mean, the path kind of chose me. So I had been volunteering with various organizations before I came to Hands of Justice for probably about 5 years.
Same area?
In the same general area, yes. I volunteered with Mercy House Global and Redeemed as well. And it was actually one of the ladies that had graduated from Redeemed's program had asked me to be her +1 to a Hands of Justice gala.
Okay.
So, because she was speaking.
Before we go there.
Yes.
So when you start on this vein, what started you on this vein? So you chose to be in Redeemed or these other organizations. Were you just like, I want to give back?
I felt called to do it. There was something inside me that just drew me to this work. Okay. I didn't fully know. At that time, if you had asked me, I would say I was a survivor of childhood SA. But I would not have had the language for it, SA sexual assault. So I would have said at the time I was a survivor of childhood sexual assault.
Okay.
At the time, that's what I thought was drawing me to the work.
So you're like, I've got something happened to me. I feel like I got to do something.
Right. I want to work with other survivors, things like that. So I was drawn to volunteer with these two different organizations. And then a graduate of Redeemed was speaking at a Hands of Justice gala. And I was invited to be her +1. And so the entire event, I was sitting at the table with all the other overcomers. That's the word we like to use at HOJ. So I was sitting at the table with all the other overcomers, and people kept pointing at us the whole night and saying things about how brave these overcomers are. And I got really prickly. I got very annoyed. And so I asked myself, I said, why is this bothering you so much?
Yeah.
And in my mind, I was like, I am not a survivor of trafficking. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual assault. And then as the night wore on and I listened to the stories, I self-identified at a Hands of Justice gala.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. So that very night, I spoke to my friend who I was her plus one. She gave me our founder's phone number.
Yeah.
And I called her and she set me up with a support group to attend. And so for me,
What a moment. So
Yes.
you're feeling the prickly feeling. You're sitting there and you already worked that out in your head. You're like,
yes.
This is that.
Yes.
Wow.
And so almost at every time we speak or we have somebody self-identifies in the audience. It's become so commonplace that we even speak out and we tell people, if you've self-identified as a survivor today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we've noticed it's a recurring event. People are like me, they feel drawn to learn more about trafficking, and then they end up self-identifying when they have the language for what happened to them.
What a journey. So you're saying that you'll come across people who will, in the middle of hearing about this, start to realize that happened to me.
Yes.
What was the thing you heard from I was abused to I was trafficked? What were the words was it just being at the table and something stirred, or was there something intellectual where you're like, I'm starting to realize?
People have this image of what trafficking is. They imagine women on street corners. People paint this picture of what trafficking is in America and what it is not.
Or if it's in America.
Yes,
right? So
even if what
some don't
trafficking
believe.
looks like. I fell prey to that as well. And so I had this idea that, I went to school. I lived with my parents. I had participated in extracurriculars. I had a life. I couldn't have been trafficked. And so learning the language for what trafficking is. And the very definitions of what trafficking is and what it means.
So take us through that, because let's assume people don't know.
I'm just going to give you the one that applies to adults, and then we're going to talk about children. So trafficking involves the use of force, fraud, or coercion. So adults who are trafficked, they're either forced into it. This is what people imagine. Like
taken?
People like to imagine taken, but statistically it's less than 2% of people are kidnapped.
Okay, so it's
that end up trafficked.
Force would look like what?
Force would look like either a Romeo pimp who's like your boyfriend, and then he convinces you, if you really love me, you'll make money for us. There's the manipulation, but then it becomes force if you don't fall prey to the coercion aspect of it.
Okay, so it can go coercion to force.
To force. So force, fraud, or coercion, that's a hard word to say 3 times fast, are the earmarks of what a case has to be considered trafficking. One of those 3 things has to take place with an adult.
Okay.
Fraud looks like promises of jobs, modeling, like, hey, you have a very beautiful daughter, she could model, things like that. That's the fraud aspect of it. Coercion is the manipulation, the absolute, I was going to say words that were probably not appropriate for this podcast.
I really
the
wanted
absolute,
we can bleep.
Absolute, just the gaslighting and the manipulation of how you think.
So someone who's coerced doesn't necessarily know that they're being trafficked.
A lot of times they don't know that they're trafficked.
Yeah.
So for an adult, it has to involve those 3 things. For a child, you don't have to meet any of those measures because children cannot consent.
Right.
So any child who is trafficked, they don't have to be forced. There doesn't have to be fraud. There doesn't have to be the legal definition of coercion, because the very fact that a child is involved in a sex act is a crime, let alone a sex act that somebody is profiting off of.
Yeah, I've heard this in people talking about their kid and saying, well, this inappropriate thing happened, but it was consensual, but they're children, so
children can't consent.
Yeah, that's some people don't know that. When you think about it, you know it. I think it's when it's your own kid, and there's a strange thing, and I would say I've seen it here more, where people protect their kids when inappropriate things happen, which surprised me actually. But I understand it from a parent standpoint. But yeah, okay, so that's good. That's a good line of anything that happens sexually. Yes. Is that accurate?
So any sexual activity involving a minor that somebody profits off of, whether they make money, whether a debt is forgiven, whether there's goods or services are traded, promises of anything, that is considered trafficking.
Okay.
So for me personally, until I learned that and that clicked in my head, I was like, oh, I was trafficked.
Wow.
And you would think that that would be a devastating realization. And it was. It wasn't like it was fun and I was happy, but it was a powerful realization because I finally had language for what had happened to me.
So helps on the healing journey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I had been in therapy previously. I didn't stick. I had done a lot of self-work. I was very self-aware. But until I had this language for what had happened to me, I could not begin the healing journey that I was on, that I'm now currently on. So for me, I came to HOJ as a client, receiving support group services.
Yeah.
And then I poured myself into healing like it was my job.
Yeah.
I did all my homework. I came to therapy prepared and worked very, very hard. And so as I grew in my healing, my role with HOJ grew. And so I ended up being a substitute support group leader. Then I became a support group leader. Then I came on staff. And now I am over all the support groups. So I'm the umbrella of support for all our support group leaders. I lead 4 support groups, fixing to be 5 personally. In particular, I lead the very support group that I went to for help. I now lead that group.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, you understand it.
Yes.
And you're still going through it, which is something people don't all fully understand, is your journey is always like this healing journey doesn't end. And that's not you, that's everybody.
Yes.
You know, when you work out that we need we need repair. But yeah, that's amazing. What a story. So what did happen?
In my childhood, I was trafficked by my parents. The very first instances, the very first need that my parents identified that I could earn money to fill that need is my sister was born with strabismus, which is her eyes were crossed, and they did not have money for the surgery.
Yeah.
So through whatever nefarious connections and means that they had, they realized that I could earn the money for that surgery.
Oh my goodness.
So the very first instance that ever happened to me, I was 3 years old.
Wow.
And I earned the money for my sister's eye surgery. After that started, well, then it was like, well, she can help us pay this bill. And, oh, I owe this person money. And it even got to the point that I had to perform in order to earn my own babysitting. People would babysit me, and I would have to perform acts on them in order to earn my babysitting.
That's wild.
It's, yeah.
For people, that's the average person. That's unthinkable.
Absolutely. But it's what I grew up with. It's what
you experienced.
It's what I experienced. And I didn't know it wasn't normal.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've said before is if you're growing up in an English-speaking household, you have no idea that people across the street or across the world are speaking a different language than you because you're a child and you don't understand. There's a different language spoken in that household. You don't have the ability to comprehend that. Well, for me, the language that was spoken in my household was a language of exploitation and abuse. And I did not understand as a child that this wasn't happening in all households everywhere. To me, it was what happened to little girls.
So it's interesting to hear that story and then imagine that for years you just thought there was no money involved, or did you know there was money involved, or did you work that out later?
No, I didn't realize there was money involved. I thought it was just abuse, but we view things through a lens when we're a child, and then you try not to think about these things, and some memories are repressed, different things. So I hadn't really stared it in the face and confronted the memories of what had happened to me. And so that is what happened when I started on this healing journey. I was staring the things that happened to me in the face. I was looking for the memories. I was looking for the pieces of the puzzle because for me, I would have these memories and I would have everything that happened before, everything that happened after, very, very detailed, but the little puzzle piece that was in the middle of the actual abuse, I didn't have that piece. And so as I was healing and going through different modalities of therapy, we found those puzzle pieces and we put those pieces back in. And so I was able to make these connections as like, okay, that was trafficking and that was trafficking. Oh, yeah, that was. And so there was so many things in my life. And if you had asked me when I first started going to therapy, I would have said the timeline was from 3 to about 8.
Yeah.
But as I've gone through therapy and as I've walked this healing journey, I've realized it didn't stop when I was 8. There were things that continued on to my early teens as well.
I've heard people talk about this age and trafficking. Really hard to think about for anybody, but strange, that age. Most people will think teens, oh, that's so shocking. Early teens, that's shocking. Children is just such a a difficult subject. Do you find that? I mean, it's since it's part of your story and meeting people, and do you not bring it up a lot, or how does that work in your life? Because I always think of coming out of trafficking as freedom is the game.
Yes.
Right? Living a normal life is winning
Mm-hmm.
because it was designed to destroy.
Right. Because I'm in the work, and because I work with clients every day, and because this is my life.
It is you.
It is me. So for me, it's very different than what I would maybe recommend to a client.
Sure.
You know, people that I work with, they don't have to live this out loud. They don't have to. But for me, the way that I felt called beforehand to do this work before I even knew that this is what happened to me.
Yeah.
And even more so, doubling down after, it's almost like I didn't even feel like I had a choice. This is just like, this is a way for me to make beauty from ashes of what happened to me. This is a way for me to make something positive happen out of the horrors that happened to me, because there are so few people that are familial trafficked that are ever able to speak about it. And I mean ever. We are one of the only organizations in the country that has a familial trafficking support group, and it grew to the point that we now have 2.
Yeah.
Because we have people on staff that are willing to talk about it. But it's so very rare, and specifically to have somebody that's able to talk about it publicly, it's practically unheard of.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was doing this work, the fact that in my healing journey, I was encouraged to speak and I was encouraged to continue to pour in, I just feel like sharing what happened to me and sharing my story and using my voice to tell my story is empowering to me, but it's also an encouragement to other people, because there's going to be somebody watching this podcast that was familial trafficked and they can never say those words out loud.
Right.
But for them to know that they're not alone, for them to know that they can find healing, that they can find hope, they can find recovery from what happened to them, even if they do that quietly, privately, never join anti-trafficking.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be your whole life.
No.
I feel this way when people are early in just starting to get away, you know, to find freedom themselves. As they go on that journey, it's one of the first things they think is, why did this happen? And then the second thing is, maybe it's so that I can help others, as opposed to, this doesn't define who you are, which is the better thought. And now you choose, go on your journey of freedom, but it doesn't. This isn't who you are. It's something that happened to you.
I think specifically with childhood things, that is so very hard to unpack. And that takes a lot of work to unpack that and to be like, this is not who, because for me, since it happened at such a formative age, there was no me before the trauma. So for people who were trafficked later in life, a lot of therapeutic techniques are like, what did you enjoy doing before the life?
Who were you?
Who were you? What did you enjoy? I was 3 years old. I slept with a blanket with silky edges, you know, like I had a doll.
Yeah.
And so for me specifically, and for all childhood survivors, it's very, very hard to figure out who you are in the midst of that. And so for me, it was very empowering to live this out loud. You can tell by looking at me. I'm not exactly a wallflower. I'm not trying to blend in. I know. I'm not very subtle. And
you have a style, that's what I would say.
A little bit. And so for me, it's another form of self-expression, like the tattoos and the blue hair and the Doc Martens. This is me expressing who I truly am.
Yeah.
And it's hard because people make assumptions about you.
Yeah.
So usually when I tell people, when I'm speaking, I will say things like, I'm an overcomer of childhood familial sex trafficking. And I kind of let it drop there. And then people can make their own assumptions. Doing this work, there is a marked difference between how people treat me, knowing I was trafficked as a child, and how they may treat somebody who was trafficked as an adult. And
interesting.
And so for me, I want people to understand that just like I did not have a choice, just like I had no choice, so many survivors of trafficking, they had no choice in the matter.
Right.
It's not because they made bad choices, and everybody who's a victim of trafficking, it's because they were drug users, or they could have made a bad choice in who they dated. Who among us has not made a bad choice in who we have dated at some point in their life?
Don't make me cry.
Okay, but that one bad choice of the really bad guy to date is what affected the rest of their life, and the fact that they were trafficked. And so for me, a lot of people will look at me and almost be like, Oh, okay,
well,
but
for
you didn't.
you,
It's
it's
different. And I
Wow.
try to tell people that no, it's not different just for me. It's the same thing across the board. Yes, are there people who are trafficked because they did drugs? Absolutely. But anyone who's trafficked against their will is equal as what happened to me to what happens to them. Just because you make one bad choice doesn't mean that you deserve to be like used as a commodity because you made bad choices. So even if a person made a choice, that I've made bad choices, we've all made bad choices. But just because somebody makes what somebody else determines a bad choice and they end up in the life, people need to realize that they had just as much control over it in most cases as I did as a 3-year-old child. And I really try to hone in on that because people want to identify with my story of trafficking and then excuse the other stories of trafficking.
Like that's somehow they deserve that or they chose that.
They chose that because it makes them feel safer. It makes them feel better because it's like, well, it's not going to happen to my child because they made bad choices. They lived in the wrong neighborhood. They did something wrong. They didn't have a father in their life. And so it's easy for people to vilify the women who were trafficked rather than believe the hard truths that trafficking happens in every neighborhood, in every city, in every state, in every country. I mean, like it happens everywhere.
To all backgrounds.
All backgrounds, all races, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all religions. It happens.
And you're seeing that. I mean, that's the nice thing. This isn't a theory for you.
Oh, yes.
You're dealing with that daily. You're dealing with it over and over and seeing it coming from all sorts of backgrounds. I think that's really important because we talk about it, but not everyone has seen that, and you deal with it every day.
Yes.
I think that's really important. I think another thing, you had a language that you thought, people across the street had a different language. Society has a language about trafficking that is also wrong, and there's some deep-rooted misunderstandings or just not understandings because the picture people have of what happens in prostitution, for example. They've got this packaged Hollywood, I would say is probably the most influential picture. And getting the real story to people, they don't want that story because it is kind of scary.
Right.
And that challenge of how to think about this, because we're encouraging people to have a language, maybe not a full language, but this podcast is designed to help people get down the road of understanding. What would you say is important for people to know about interaction or people who've been trafficked and how to think about that?
So for this one, how many times do we see a politician or a football coach or any sports figure and they have a scandal? They're caught with a prostitute and everybody, is like, oh, they're up in arms. And then invariably people will say, well, his wife forgave him, so who am I to judge? Because somebody can run a football down a field or tell people how to run a football down a field or because they're making our laws. And so people think, well, his wife forgave him, but nobody ever thinks, and I've never, ever, not once heard anybody ever say, did the woman he bought like a commodity, did she forgive him? Did he even think about asking for her forgiveness?
Wow.
And I think until people can think that way and they cannot see people who are either participating in survival prostitution or being trafficked as these home-wrecking, just deviants, until they can see them as people, the people who are worthy of an apology, people who are worthy of consideration, then we are not going to change how trafficking takes place in this country or any other country because we still vilify the victims rather than vilify the people who are the perpetrators of the crime.
Who don't think they're perpetrators.
Exactly.
There's a definite comfort blanket, I would say, that is being used for people who buy sex to say, this is someone who chose this.
And, there's a male loneliness epidemic. So therefore, men are going to turn to this. And there's diminishing what is happening. They're diminishing the fact that they are participating in human trafficking. They like to think of it as a single mom who's just going rogue, making money for her kids, Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, or, other very famous sex workers on TikTok who are making it seem, glorifying it. And so people want to believe that rather than believe the truth of what happens. And so as long as we vilify the victims of trafficking, then the organizations who are doing the work, they're not going to get the funding they need. They're not going to get the volunteers that they need. They're not going to get survivors willing to stand up and say, this is what happened to me. This is my story. Listen, because it can happen to you and it can happen to your child as well, or to you as an adult. So until we change this perception, we're not going to be able to make the strides that we could make.
I will say one of the sad truths is it's reaching into people's lives now. When we do the different things that we do, we get usually someone who goes, this sounds like my child. And 100% of them have been either being groomed or their child is missing. And that happens across, we gather groups of people, 30 people in a company, there's going to be one.
Right.
That's a wild stat for what you think if you gather 30 people in your network together. So there's at least one where this is happening that we know of, right?
Yes. It's like anything in life. People only really care when it becomes personal to them. Somebody they know, their child, themselves. And so for people to care without it have happened to them, that's when we're going to make a difference in the world. That's when we're going to cut down on supply. That's when we're going to destigmify being a trafficking victim. We're going to, because people are not receiving services because they're afraid to come forward and receive services because they don't want to have to wear that label forever.
You're saying it, and as someone I know who has been going through an awareness of this happened, and you can feel that fear of, I don't want to be one of those people. That's crazy.
Right. And that's because societally we vilify the victims of trafficking rather than support them.
Well, and I think I've come across, I won't name names, but I've come across men who are like, I don't know how you can have someone who's being a prostitute in your house and be okay. Like, not like they're like, is it a temptation? I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, that's just a weird thought, And
the fact that they feel more comfortable speaking that thought into existence than the survivors being willing to say, hi, I think I've survived this. Can I receive help?
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah. No, I felt that. I think when we first got involved, what we learned was we were different because we were comfortable with people who've come through this experience. That turned out to be unique, which is a real shame. Kind of gets into the societal issue. People are not thinking straight about the subject, and so that's our journey for people, is understanding that this is complex for people, because it's the reality against the story that has been pushed for a long time.
Right.
The oldest profession statement might be the worst.
Right.
Because it's not just saying this is society today, it's saying this has always been there. Don't worry about it.
Right. And it's always going to be there. And just going back to that, I personally am a believer, and it's part of my healing journey. There's no evidence anywhere in the Bible, anywhere in extra biblical sources, that Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. It's not mentioned. But if you ask anybody, they'll say, oh, Mary Magdalene was a prostitute.
Yeah.
But that's because people assume that a woman who had prostitute.
Gives the summary of what that means.
Right. And so even a woman who there's no evidence is being given this label. And then here in 2025, we wonder why people don't want to wear that label, and then they don't get services that they need.
So it's an interesting, you're mentioning services. When people are trafficked, so not your case so much, but people who are being pushed through it in their teen years and into life, a strange thing people don't understand is they don't have services. They don't have care. They don't have money, which is one of the things people can't get their head around, because they think they're touching a lot of money every day.
Exactly.
When you deal with people coming away from that life, what kind of needs do they have?
Very base needs. Like, a lot of people won't have their IDs because their IDs are taken as a means of control. So a lot of times people don't have ID, and so they can't do anything.
They're literally running away from someone who has the documentation on their life.
Most times the documents will be held by the trafficker as a means of control.
Oh, I didn't know that was common, but that's common.
Yes, it's very common. It's a very common tactic. So a person's leaving with no access to money, usually the clothes on their back a lot of times, no access to a vehicle, no access to a work history, a rental history. They are leaving with nothing. Usually, I shouldn't say, oftentimes their credit is used and just they run up cards and different things on their credit.
So they destroy their credit.
They destroy their credit as well. Wow. So there are programs in place that are credit restoration programs, different things like that. But at HOJ, we have people coming to us who need help with getting the records expunged, who might not have ID, who have needs of stable housing, who have needs of trauma-informed therapy. That's one of the pillars of what we do at HOJ is we connect survivors with licensed trauma-informed therapists, and we offset the cost of that for them. We offer support group services. We have many different types of support group services, both partnering with other anti-trafficking organizations in the area, as well as open across the country and even internationally if people are so inclined. But we also offer advocacy services as well. So if I have somebody that comes to me, they need their record expunged, I can't help them with that. But I have a list of resources that I can connect them with and help them to get their record expunged. I have the information for the credit expungement. I can connect them with resources, but we're pulling from a very small pool for a very large amount of people.
Yeah, because I think you could hear you wrong in this, that we're good, thanks, we got everything. You have services and ability to access services, but you also have a need for support. And what does that look like?
Well, even just the waiting list to get into low-cost housing is years long. Last time I checked, it was 2.5 years long. So yes, I have resources that I can connect them with that waiting list to get for low-cost, no-cost housing. It's 2.5 years.
Wow. So housing, shelter care, because you're a services organization. You're not providing shelter.
We do not provide a safe house. We're not a safe house or provide housing.
So if someone's listening and they're a professional with a skill, donation obviously is great.
Yes.
What's the website, or how do they donate?
It's handsofjustice.org.
Okay, handsofjustice.org. So please do that if that's your space. If you have a lot of money, put all of it in there. That'd be great.
That'd be amazing.
We'll take it. I had someone ask me the other day, is this too much? Like, are you used to this? Like, just give us the money. But services, doctors, dentists, like
absolutely,
lawyers, is that all? Yes. We've got places to use.
We have places. We can always use more.
Because spreading that load, that's what I've noticed. There are people who are like, I will do this for you because I am passionate. But really, they shouldn't do as much as they do.
A big need that we have is either tattoo removal or tattoo cover-up, because oftentimes the people that we work with have been branded. They're tattooed. They're tattooed on their necks, tattooed on their faces, they're tattooed on their hands. And
explain branding for a second, just while we're on this subject, so people can understand it.
A particular trafficker will have their own brand. A lot of times they'll involve crowns, money symbols, barcodes, but they'll have one that's unique to their stable. And so they will literally brand
and
like
their stable is a group of women,
a group of women and men, children, whoever they are.
Okay.
Yes, because men are 30% of trafficking victims are men.
And you guys service men, and that's a really important thing, because I don't see enough of that.
Exactly. So they will brand all of their people as a mark of ownership. But then some people may be sold. Another trafficker may take them, and people end up with 2 or 3 brands.
Yeah.
So people will end up with wanting to get a job, and they've got brands that were not their choice. All of these, I chose every single one of them.
Okay, good.
A lot of people don't. This was not their choice. They did not choose to get tattooed on their face or their neck or their hands, and they're wanting to get stable employment.
And it's got to be a trigger every day.
Every day. To look in the mirror and to see that mark that you belong to somebody, that you are their property. It weighs on you. So it's an unconventional need that we have is for tattoo removal, tattoo cover-ups. That's amazing.
Can be expensive, the larger the tattoo.
Yes.
The creative work that is needed if you're going to cover up.
Exactly. because certain colors are harder to remove than other colors, and the traffickers know that.
Right, and these are all designed in from the process standpoint. These are things they know are barriers to exit.
Yes.
Everything you've described as your needs is also on the list of barriers to exit. They're created so that you will not walk. And then they let them live in somewhat freedom, because everyone thinks they're locked in a room, shackled to something, and most cases not.
Most cases are not, but they are controlled.
Controlled,
but they have the illusion of freedom.
That's right.
With controls. Now, some people are shackled. I have a client that was.
Does happen. Yeah.
And it does happen. However, people they get their nails done. However, there's control. One of the things that you may notice is if you ask them a question, they may seem like they're responding from a prepared script, or they may look before they answer. Even if their trafficker's not there, they'll be very used to like looking for them before they answer a question. So especially doctors, nurses, things like that, people they'll ask you a question and they'll look for approval before answering. And so that's a telltale sign, because people are scripted on what to say and what not to say. So even though there's this illusion of freedom, everything that they say is controlled. Eye contact is a huge deal. You are not allowed to make eye contact with anyone, but especially not another trafficker. So people who don't make eye contact, yes, they could very well be on the spectrum. So not everyone who doesn't make eye contact is being trafficked. I want to say that very clearly. However, somebody that used to make eye contact, that used to be able to look you in the eye and talk to you, when they can't do that anymore, there's a change in behavior. That can be a very big warning sign. But if I'm going for a job interview and I can't look you in the eye, that's going to be a barrier to an employment. That's going to be a barrier to leaving. And so these little things add up into big things.
Right.
And so one of the pillars of what we do at Hands of Justice is economic empowerment. So we help try to, through scholarships, through different programmings that we have, to help people to find second chance employment, to help them to learn job skills and interviewing skills, to make resumes.
So another place people can help.
Yes. If you have skills in this area, we have people who need your services.
Awesome.
Just about anything. Everybody has a talent or a skill, something they're good at. And for some people, that may be writing checks or putting their credit card information into a website, and that's amazing. But for other people, it can look like helping somebody who's never filed their taxes before through that process.
Right.
It could be just being a mentor to somebody who's never had a person in their life that doesn't want something from them, because your entire life is transactional. So if somebody is nice to you, you feel like you owe them. So just having a person in your life that you don't owe them anything is a breath of fresh air. It's a vitally important thing. So
play an instrument, paint, yoga. So some of the things are not specifically on the barrier removal. They're just helping people in life and being available. There's no shortage. And I always say there isn't anyone we couldn't find something for them to do in this space. And that's so if you feel like this could be me, it is.
Right.
It is you. Well, let's do a quick, we're running long, but I'm enjoying it so much. Getting so much value out of this. How about talking about trauma-informed care? It's a language that I know around trafficking and dealing with people who have experienced that. But being trauma-informed, what does that mean? Trauma
affects every aspect of a person's life, especially people who experienced continual recurring traumas. Most people will develop what's called complex PTSD. Everybody's familiar with PTSD, but complex PTSD is usually the result of recurring trauma. One of the things that I've said before is when we hear that a man has PTSD, we think that he's done something. He ran into a burning building. He was a first responder. He was in the armed forces. When we hear that a woman has PTSD, we think that something was done to her.
Wow.
And so just even destigmatizing the very fact that a person could say, yes, I have PTSD in their workplace. And so if you were my boss and I were to come to you and say, I have complex PTSD, And there may be times where I may need to take a break and go into the bathroom for a minute, or certain things may trigger me. And for you to respond to me in an understanding way, that's being trauma informed.
Okay.
So for you to not be annoyed that like, oh, this, nobody wants to work these days. They're going to be running off to the bathroom every 5 minutes saying they're triggered. That's not being trauma informed.
Right.
So having the language and understanding what being triggered is and what that means and how to just come beside, you don't have to fix it.
Yeah.
You just need to be informed enough to not make things worse.
Yeah.
So triggered is a phrase that's getting overused these days.
It's not helping.
It's like, I can't find a parking spot. I was so triggered.
Yeah.
But what a trigger does is it causes an emotional flashback. So when somebody who has experienced trauma is triggered, they are now having an emotional flashback of something that happened to them. In this moment, it is very important for them to be able to ground. I am not there. I am in, July 2025. This is where I am. This is how old I am. This is what's happening to me, and do some breathing, because that can take you out of the emotional flashback.
Yeah.
If you can't take that moment, if you don't have the freedom to even take that moment because you're afraid your boss is going to get mad at you for needing that time, or you're afraid you're going to be judged for that, then it's going to be preventative to people to be able to maintain and to hold jobs and to have economic empowerment and to stay out of the life.
That's good. It's a long subject that we took short, so thank you, because we're at the end of the show. So Thank you very much. Appreciate your time. We'll definitely have you back, and we'll do some more discovery.
Yes.
If that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is really helpful. So thank you, Carrie. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. And if anybody's interested, please go to hoj.org. We have lots of events coming up. And
support. Jump in any way you can.
Yes, we have a fashion show coming up in September, and if you wanted to support us just by attending the fashion show, that's a way that people can come, and you would learn a little bit more about trafficking, have a nice afternoon, have some lunch, and hang out with your friends and support our nonprofit.
Have a lot of positive things supporting people who've gone through some hard things. I love it.
Yes.
Great. Well, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And we'll catch you next time.